Oh, yeah. Yo, let's do this. Now picture homie rolling.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the X Cultural Podcast webcast powered by Vistatec. Vistatec provides an end-to-end global content journey that supports many of the most innovative and iconic brands in the world. X Cultural is the intersection between passion, culture, global communications to inspire ideas, connectivity, and global mindedness. I'm your host, Michael Asquith, and thanks so much to the global community for listening. In this episode, we will discuss the topic and subtopics related to pop culture and global business, how it influences the way we think and are, the crossovers and universalities between cultural symbols and icons, regardless of where you are in the world, global and cross-cultural communications, G-local content development, inspirational imagery that influences international marketing, transcreation, localization, and so much more. Today, I'm very excited to have a truly exceptional talent and individual with a unique journey from Bollywood, India to Austin, Texas. She presently works for a global SaaS construction company called Procore, where she is based in Austin, Texas, as I mentioned. And she has carved out her own path as a transformational thought leader and entrepreneurial localization executive on the product and tech side. I am truly ecstatic to have Iti Sahai, a passionate globalization innovator, on this show. Iti, hello, how are you?
Great to have you.
Hello. Hi, I'm doing really well. Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little hectic, so I'm a little sweaty from going through this the process of making sure that this video works, right? But it's great to have you on the show and to talk about pop culture. It's a subject that I'm extremely excited about. It influences a lot of what goes on in my daily life, professionally, and also personally. And I'm a huge music fan, and so you can obviously see the video with the kid Elvis there. But yeah, today I really wanted to kind of also hear your cultural perspective on pop culture, how it is influencing your work in what you do at Procore, et cetera. And I think that it's just really good for us to have this discussion and then have these different crossovers and the kind of interconnectivity of these things with pop culture. And just wanted to, of course, maybe first, before we kind of get into the whole pop culture subject, I think that it's really good to kind of give your kind of pop song version of who you are, Iti, and also your background, and also how you've come to be here today as a localization leader at Procore.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my professional journey in the film industry. I started it in the Indian film industry, which is very fondly addressed as Bollywood. And then I transitioned into Hollywood, leading acquisitions and international growth and localization for an independent film distribution studio. And through that journey, I've had the enormous experience of working for some leaders in their space, the companies that I have consulted with and worked for, and of course, taking their products and services internationally. So I like to believe that I'm a storyteller at heart, because that's just very, the core of who I am, a storyteller. And through my journey and my professional experience so far, I've been able to transition into localization and international growth. And I like to say that, as a storyteller now, I take the stories of these products, these services, and into international international waters, essentially into a new culture, a new community, which is telling the story to that region by the way of localization and language. So it still drives, and that is what really motivates the storyteller within me in my work today. And I lead international growth through localization for Procore Technologies. For those of you who are not familiar, it's the leader in construction technology, which is unifying, everyone's experience and everyone who interacts with a construction project and its life cycle on a global platform. So it's a very complex, suite of products, because there are thousands of people collaborating on a project to deliver that, community, and not just a building, but a community that we live in and we thrive in and we experience this life through. So, yeah.
Yeah. So tell me, that was one of our commonalities right from the start, was storytelling. And you know, you came to the United States at the age of, I think you said 21, if I recall. And you know, tell me a little bit more kind of how Bollywood, you know, from Bollywood to the US, how that has influenced, you know, your career, especially as you know, when it comes to communications, translation, localization, in that sense. You know, I know that you've had other experiences beyond, you know, just Procore on that side of the equation, and you worked on the vendor side for localization as well. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit more about, you know, some of that and your own kind of work and how that kind of influences that.
Yeah, I'm particularly intrigued by the visual here.
Yeah, so this yeah no, it's a very funny. I thought it was kind of, are those characters from Bollywood, or is that just a mock-up?
I don't know who these people are, but they look very very serious and stuff, very determined to holding this tulip.
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. So you were in film, but how did that transition kind of, you know, happen exactly? I mean, where is that overlap?
So my experience, even in film, was I can recall one of the earliest projects I worked on was a documentary film, which was about the microeconomies in emerging countries and how the lack of financial structures, despite that, these microeconomies thrive and they're not really attributed for within the GDP, but they still are able to thrive within a very complex economic structure. And it was very intriguing to me as a concept, and also as, you know, a young person entering the world of business and storytelling. But I took that experience where, you know, I was very young. I was probably in high school when I collaborated on that, you know, with one of the leading documentary filmmakers in India on this project. And I was probably, you know, the production assistant, transcribing, and, you know, starting from the very initial stages of the film. But I was, you know, involved in the project, and it was just such an insightful experience to really see the experiences we have around us and how we interact with the world from a holistic perspective, and to put things in context so that we can, you know, define the value our role brings to delivering that project. And film is, in all reality, a very complex product that we deliver, which is, again, a very collaborative experience. It's a form of art, I believe, that cannot be just done by one person. It is, you know, it's a team effort, which is very much like global expansion and business, where growth is a team sport. You know, international especially is a team sport, if not golf, as I like to say. So putting things into context and identifying the value that your role brings to that equation is very important. So when I transitioned from film, I was always a part of, you know, the Indian cinema and the diaspora that was quite up and coming, and it was being noticed globally about, you know, 20 years back. So that gave me an insight into global business. And as I transitioned, you know, into working for numerous film studios in LA, and finding my way through that industry, I realized that my heart lies within international business. And I like to believe that product is the tip of the spear that we go to market with. Language and localization is the tip of that tip of the spear, right? So if we don't get the language and the localization accurate, then it's really not delivering that value to our end user. And we don't want to be in that business, right? So we want to be providing the delight and eventually having that the end user fall in love with our products and services over time. So I transitioned after, you know, because I'm a nerd, don't tell anyone, but I'm a nerd.
Not at all. We've talked quite extensively, and you're definitely not a nerd.
Let's just be a secret between us. So yeah, I went to business school at UCLA, and that led me into, you know, a wonderful opportunity working for an LSP, which allowed me the full overview of the localization workflow, you know, the magic behind the veil, what goes on really in you know, behind the scenes, and allowed me to build that empathy towards my linguists, towards my vendors, towards these you know, magicians that bring content and stories to life, really. and allow for businesses to deliver that to users in region.
So on that note, so with like we've kind of talked about like local content development, and I'm curious with pop culture too, what kind of commonalities, universalities in pop culture that there are, specifically coming from India to the United States. You know, we've talked about iconic things, you know, Michael Jordan from the United States, and that being kind of a crossover. Everybody knew Michael Jordan, and then there's this topic of Americanization versus globalization. And then, you know, one of the quotes that was shown earlier and kind of a part of this too is, you know, what that I really liked the quote was, it was talking specifically that the next frontier is really, instead of it being so Americanized, it being much more globalized. How are there certain things that you think that resonate better from a cultural perspective, you know, in India or in other markets, you know, and are you starting to see those things kind of overlap? And of course, we'll see some of those things in the background images, but does anything particularly come to mind?
You know, I grew up in India, and growing up, I was consuming a lot of international content. That content was coming from, of course, the West, which was, you know, predominantly United States. But at the same time, there was a lot of Asian content that would be pulled into our, you know, at that time we had very limited television channels available in India, and and in that time, you know, of course, with poor localization and translation, and of course, growing up, it ruined a lot of things for me, including the Little Mermaid, which will never be the same. But the one thing I recall, you know, growing up, is I would come back from school at around 3 p.m. every day. And that was a time my mom and I would have a late lunch, and Oprah would be on TV. And so that was our shared experience. And what that allowed me was, because it was a show that was not dubbed or subtitled, it was in its true raw format, the way it was broadcasted in the US. So that hour or that window of time allowed me an insight into the West, into the American culture, into the hot topic stories, because that's where I understood I had the insight into the conversations, everything from, you know, being a criminal to a you know, a spiritual guru. Everyone was invited on that platform to really share their experience, and which was such a so it was such a revelation in a lot of ways, that, oh, this is what it is like. And also it allowed for me to see someone in a position of authority and power and influence who looked like one of my, you know, distant relatives, one of my aunts. So it was very relatable, and it was a content in the right context and unadulterated. So I was able to absorb it in the right way. But you know, you had earlier shown the video or the slide of Gangnam Style, which brings me to how pop culture defines our experiences despite where we grow up, or, you know, because that defines the way we interact with the world around us. And it's sort of this thread that ties us together. A few years back, I was on an offsite in Shanghai with my regional stakeholders and my regional teams. And as the host team in Shanghai, you know, they organized an after work event for us, which was karaoke. Karaoke in itself, for the you know, for the experts, the Japanese experts joining us, is, you know, it's the empty or hollow orchestra, which is such a Japanese concept. However, we are in Shanghai, we're a group of 20, and we're there singing karaoke, where we, of course, you know, we were probably the same age group, but we grew up in different parts of the world, everywhere from Israel, India, and, you know, the APAC region to the US. And that became our shared experience, because with music and this pop cultural phenomenon of karaoke, we started the night with Gangnam Style and various iterations of it with our, you know, with my regional team and stakeholders from Korea. And it's one of my fondest memories on a business trip, because we sang songs, of course, you know, as lingua franca being English, we sang songs from Savage Garden, which is Australian, to Kylie Minogue, who's Australian, to Spice Girls and Boyzone, UKI, to Backstreet Boys and a lot of American musicians wrapping up the night, tying it up with a beautiful little bow, singing Drake. It was Canadian.
Yeah. See, you were perfect. You were perfect. You had the world music right there and then. So, and I think that you bring up an awesome, incredible, powerful thing that goes on. I think when you meet people from around the world, and we're very fortunate to work in multinational environments where you have to find those commonalities, and it's always awesome when you figure out that people are very much the same. They all feel and care about a lot of the same things. And I think when you're able to build that kind of trust and that camaraderie, I think it's just makes that experience even better. So yeah, I think that's a wonderful example. So yeah, so back to kind of storytelling in that sense. Are you kind of when you kind of tell your stories, or when you're kind of do you write, by the way? That was one thing we didn't really talk too much about. Do you write your own kind of content, or do you get into kind of international marketing content?
I do, and I have in the past. However, I really do believe in trusting the experts, because they are in region, they are more attuned to the pulse of the region and what culturally is the regional understanding. So I believe in the experts. I'm mostly in those conversations, in the background, just sort of navigating the conversation, but I allow for my regional stakeholders and my teams to lead that conversation, because that content is it's related to them and to the value they know they want to deliver to their user in region. So I trust the experts.
No, absolutely. That's definitely good to know. So are there other things, like other than Oprah? Is there other things growing up that you really kind of that struck a chord with you personally? From anywhere from around the world, as far as we talked about a ton of music and how that influences things. And I think Oprah's a great example of a woman leader, of somebody who's a big personality and very generous and personable and all those things. So I think that probably left quite an impression on you, as far as kind of that global kind of perspective, or I guess somewhat of an Americanized perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a lot of things. I recall in one of my recent meetings with my devs, they had mentioned this, real life sporting show, which some of them grew up watching for some, on some network or something like that. And I didn't know the name that they were referring it with that, to, because it was perhaps dubbed or, localized for the US market. But I observed them, discuss this. And then I was like, hey, I had something similar, which was like a real life size castle where people, got into very physical sports and like giant, balloons or costumes. And it was just sort of a comical event. And I was like, but it was called Takeshi's Castle. And it was a Japanese show, which was dubbed by Indian comic at that time, and because he would do the voiceover, and then I grew up watching that, and I'm like, that is exactly what it was called, because that was the original title, but in the US it was dubbed differently. So it's just fascinating that randomly, there's a link to a series, a show that I would watch in the evenings, after doing my homework, and my dad here, which of course are brilliant humans, they had a similar experience on this side of the world.
No, I think that's awesome, and the whole kind of idea with culture and bringing people together, creating ideas, and then more disruption for more innovation. Hopefully that's kind of like, to me, the purpose of bringing people together, is you get that kind of different take on things. Are there instances in your life, or things that you've seen with regularity or often, where culture is a big part of kind of the direction of either the content that you're doing for Procore, or as you're kind of trying to adapt to those users and to enhance that user experience? How does that kind of impact that, and how do you guys kind of incorporate that, or how do you think is the best way to incorporate that?
Construction tech is a very complex complex product, I would say, because it's as an industry, construction historically has been very paper heavy and process oriented, but it's the last to come to the digitization and the digital frontier. However, it's blue collar tech is adapting quite quickly and rapidly towards that change. And with the recent pandemic, we have observed that having a connected network where folks are able to collaborate, and this is in our everyday lives too, right? Like when we have those tools to collaborate virtually, because we are in distributed teams and we aren't really able to be in a physical space, collaboration is key. And at the same time, allowing for a way to communicate, because the way we communicate as an organization defines a lot of how we are, even in the way we behave and the way we interact with our customers. Our internal communication really transcends to that as well. And as far as growing outside of our comfort zone in our domestic region, it's very important to understand the different layers of culturalization that go into taking your product and to truly being able to achieve the product market fit, because that is one of the few things, I would say, a handful of pillars one needs to fully be able to configure in order to gain that global success. And language is, it's wonderful, and it's, the first way how you will reach your end user, but language itself cannot guarantee the adoption or cannot guarantee the success in region. It can unlock the perhaps the initial conversation for you in terms of how you map the user journey in terms of the content you are reaching, how they're even discovering you and finding you in region, but really achieving that product market fit, and also the infrastructure in place to be able to allow the in-region stakeholders, especially in the emerging markets, be able to access your content, access your product, is instrumental to that growth, along with, I believe, the language strategy, the language that you choose to go to market with India being such a diverse country where numerous languages are spoken in by huge parts of the population. It's hard to pick and choose one or a few. And it's really important to have a very succinct and focused language strategy into how you are even showing your seriousness in the market, and really delivering that value to the customer. Of course, that ties into the localization strategy as well. So it's all sort of interconnected in how you even develop your content, how you identify what content to either localize or allow for it to organically be created in region. And so it's
is it something you're also doing with your internal stakeholders to kind of just bring awareness to these types of things? Because they obviously, maybe they don't have the cultural background that you do. How do you go about doing that? Is it just an educational thing, or is there other ways that you're kind of trying to bring awareness to that?
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm proud of is that I'm able to transform localization as a strategic function and make it table stakes in all conversations when we are in terms of how we are discovering, how we're developing, how we're building and deploying, like just about every part of the way. And the one limitation, especially being a US focused organization where all of this is happening here in HQ, as this is our starting off point, I do notice at times, and in my career so far, I've been a part of numerous conversations where I'm trying to make a business case for a product market fit, or even showing product gap, or trying to evangelize, if you would, for a localization or a language strategy. And more often than not, our audience in that room tends to be a monolingual group. And And I like to lead that conversation with a lot of empathy, which is built into me, having that understanding for their limitation. If I walk in a room and I start talking in a different language, I believe that's a little disrespectful, because for someone who doesn't understand a different language, it's obvious. I'm not going to make a friend out of that. And as it is, I'm
Yeah.
international. I have the perception of, slowing things down, and people are really not, people want to move, especially in a product-led organization, people are moving a million miles a minute, and they want to focus on the next, next initiative on their roadmap. However, to navigate that conversation, one of the fun things that I do is, and I've done in the past, is Jimmy Fallon, who is a late night television host, talk show in the US. He does a bit where he invites musicians and singers, and he will take popular songs, retro hits and the top 40 hits currently, and he'd take that, and the bit is called Google Translate Songs, and he would take that, translate it using Google Translate into Polish or Lithuanian, and then back translate it in English, and then they sing that poorly back translated English song, and they poke fun at it, and it's all in good humor. So when I lead a conversation trying to make a business case to the monolinguals and sort of bringing them to understand and build that empathy towards the end user, is like, hey, guess what? This is how we sound like in X language, because now it sort of drives the point home without it being abrasive. It's a fun, lighthearted way to initiate that conversation. And once I have their attention is when I can, be more specific in terms of where the gaps are and where are the opportunities.
Yeah, no, I think it's a wonderful tool and example. I have seen those bits with Jimmy Fallon, with the different artists that he's had on the show, and I love it because it's obviously a testament to how what we do matters. And so yeah, when I see that, I think that's great, and I think it's a great way to kind of introduce people to kind of the do's and don'ts. So, and why you can't just have everything machine translated or something along those lines. So I can definitely appreciate that. So bringing that into the kind of this situation, how, from a global collaborative kind of situation, how are you seeing, like, with your teams, is there a lot of camaraderie with your actual transnational teams, kind of building and working together? And kind of what is that kind of like for you, and how has your experience impacted that at Procore, or any of your experiences?
So in my career so far, I have had the wonderful opportunity to lead numerous distributed teams, to build those teams from ground up, and to really engage with my stakeholders over time, be it LATAM, be it UKI, APAC, EMEA, just the entire world, basically. And there's a saying in Hindi which means that as a world, as a person who believes in the world being my home, it's not that my family is just my native hometown or my native country. The world is my home. So that is sort of the philosophy I have in terms of collaboration and building teams. And it's everyone, I really do believe, and this is one of my personal mottos, and sort of ties into my personal purpose of how I like to lead as well, is that as localizers and experts in what we do, no matter what area of this workflow we contribute to, as localizers, we really do have an opinion. We have a very strong opinion in terms of what changes we'd like to see within the business and how we can drive that value with that change. However, we really just need to feel empowered to share that opinion, and everyone else in the room just needs to be encouraged to listen. And once we achieve that, in our space, wherever we are, be it working on the LSP side, working on the buyer side, either way, I really do believe that that is the ideal. That's the goal, to really be able to share our opinion. And I like to create that space for my teams because I hire experts. I like to think as an perspective. I am hands-off in the sense that I bring in experts into the room, so I really want them to share their opinion. I just am there to navigate and remove any blockers for them, so that they can bring their whole, their whole self, their complete selves to work, and be part of something that's bigger, and that is solving problems for our end users and our consumers at the end of the day. And so that's my philosophy in terms of collaboration and the approach I take towards my teams.
So we talked a little bit about this next image, right? And I think, I want to know what it means to you when you see this, because obviously Kamala Harris being the first female VP elect, and will be the first female vice president. And she's also a woman of color, of both Indian descent and also African American. And so I'm just, I know how, I just am curious your emotional kind of feel on this when you see this, and just what this meant to you, not from a political kind of perspective, but just in just kind of in just being just a very engaged, powerful woman leader as she is for you. What does that mean?
So in my experience in my life, I've had, the opportunity to have wonderful friendships with folks, distributed all over the world. And that one image sort of ties into a commonality between those experiences that we have growing up in whatever part of the world, be it the gender, the socioeconomic background, be it our sexual orientation, be it our ethnicity, whatever that is. Every culture, every community tends to impose these implicit biases and these self-limiting beliefs on us. It doesn't necessarily have to be women. I'm a woman, I'm an immigrant, and I'm a woman of color. I am ESL. And over time, I've had to work through, do a lot of personal growth work in terms of how I start to see those as my strengths as opposed to weaknesses, because failure is so normalized in the world, especially for especially for women and for marginalized communities, that failure becomes a comfortable place where it is usually the nature of the conversation starts with, at least you were invited, at least you were asked, at least you had, the opportunity.
Yeah.
It's that at least, which is sympathetic. It is, at least you were asked, and it really isn't motivating at all, or tying into empathy of any sort, because with that conversation, even someone with a very similar experience such as yours is really not leaning in to truly understand your experience and empathize with it. So failure is so normalized that I believe that it's not usually the fear of failure that drives us. Fear of failure is almost comfortable. It's very cozy, but it's the fear of success that stops us from really truly going after what we believe in, and making that, sending that first LinkedIn message or reaching out to someone that you've admired from a distance. Because what if they say yes? What if they actually say yes and they take time to meet you, and you ask them for a virtual coffee and they say yes? What will happen? Because success is a scary place to be, and it is not normalized yet. So with that image that you showed, I believe all that does for a lot of us is to create that possibility and to create hope that no matter if a certain way things were done, they were good, it was a well-oiled machine, it was efficient. However, what if we took a step back and did things differently? And what does that mean for us? And it's for us to even challenge our own beliefs, our own processes. I mean, in business, stuff could be streamlined, it's working, but what if we shook things up and we started thinking about UX and localization, we started thinking about local SEO, we started thinking about accessibility in our product and a universal design concept? What will happen then? So it's really tying into the possibility and hope of what is to come.
Yeah, I think that, it's beautifully stated, and I also think on the inclusion, diversity side of things, that has really just started to kind of resonate, I think, everywhere. And I think that's just an amazing thing to see. And, like the accessibility side that you kind of talked about too. So yeah, I think that, you're absolutely right. And I think, obviously I'm not a woman, but I think it's just amazing to kind of hear women talk about what Kamala Harris means to them, and as a woman, and also for minorities as well, that because of the fact that it's not like good enough to just, like you said, be a part of the conversation. It should be not just good enough, right? So I love that. And then, yeah, just kind of one of the things, I mean, the only reason why I had this kind of image here is more about, there's more to business than just the corporate culture, right? And I really believe that the next kind of frontier for creativity is tapping into the cultural folks that you have working within an organization, and finding ways for them to coexist, collaborate. And so, what is kind of your feeling on that? And then, of course, we can share a little bit on this experience, because you and you grew up in India. I had a chance to go to India a couple of years ago. I used to manage a team in India, and had to travel to India to meet my team, and then find ways to collaborate and pull out and extract, powerful, talented characteristics and talents from these individuals. So yes, what is your feeling on that, and how was that for you going back to India, as well as because I know you went and worked for some company that you had to do that with.
Yeah, this was a few years back. When I was working for an LSP, and we had I led a distributed team that was offshore. It was based in Mumbai, and oftentimes, I had a lovely team. I absolutely adored my team. We were very efficient. We were managing the top performing industrial automation account, along with, certain life sciences and entertainment and software. Like we were really efficient. We enjoyed working together, and there were a lot of synergies, in how we collaborated, and it was wonderful. However, I would see that oftentimes other, my colleagues who also had distributed teams, they had offshore teams to run their operations, would have this sense of frustration with the communication, with the output of their teams. And there was just a general lack of engagement from their teams. And I wanted them to have the same wonderful experience I was having with my team. I was like, well, why is your team not doing it? Like, my team is like excellent. They're rock stars. Like, you're amazing. And we have a great time working together. But I saw that disconnect. So, I spoke to my my CEO, and I was, going to India on a personal trip, and I offered to, take a week off and go meet with the team in Mumbai, which was, several hundred, wonderful employees in that office. And it's a 24/7 operation, as anyone who is familiar with the vendor side knows that it's hard work. And however, I got the blessing from my executive, and I made a small training in terms of the cultural expectations and what something means in the Indian context versus the American context. And I made sure I met with every single person in the office. They were very flexible with their time. I was, leaning in to make sure I was available to them, each and every one of them. That was important to me. And, taking the ownership of something like this that hadn't been done before. I had never done something like this before. But I really, took that initiative to drive that effort. And it was just wonderful because a couple of things. Firstly, I was able to meet with everyone. They felt heard. They felt valued. And at the same time, it still gives me chills every time I recall that experience, because it was, when I was doing my training and my presentation, it was using a lot of examples that were appropriate for the Indian context, be it, analogies and examples from Bollywood or from cricket.
Yep.
Using popular movie dialogues, which would resonate with every, person from the subcontinent who is familiar with the Indian films. it just clicked. And sure enough, once I came back and I did, the reverse of that training with my operations team here, sort of shared my findings and feedback. Overall, it impacted the engagement, it improved the engagement, and allowed for that space to really communicate better instead of assuming, and instead of feeling that hesitation, because American communication style tends to be very direct, depending on what part of the country you're from, but predominantly it's very direct, as opposed to Indian, which is very indirect communication. So it's just those nuances. And one of my favorite stories from that trip are, I was in the office, and I was of course there to meet with my team as well, and to figure out some roadmap work for the future for the client. And so I was meeting with a few ladies who worked on my client's account. And as we are talking, I tend to create that space where they feel comfortable and they don't think that I'm this person from HQ and they're not able to truly share their opinion, because I want them to share their opinion, because they're the sort of the tactical lead on that project. And all of a sudden there was a pause. They looked at each other as though they were about to say something that they had discussed previously. It was just a very subtle thing they did, exchanging looks. And then they shared with me very abruptly, but innocently at that, Iti, we're very proud of you. And I was just shook. I was like, excuse me? What? Me? Little old me? And they're like, I'm like, me, right? Like, what? And they're like, yeah, we're proud of you. And I was like, why? What did I do? And they're like, because we're proud of you, because you, as an Indian woman, you had the opportunity to go overseas, to go to the States, and you made something of yourself there, that you are now coming back home to India to share with us your learnings and share with us what you have found in your travels. And you make it so that when we look at you, we see an opportunity, we see possibility, that it's not just to go overseas and to live away from home, or to seek your fortunes away from your homeland, is something for only certain people, or just for boys in the family, because of the cultural structure in India. It tends to be the male child who's preferred and who is given those opportunities. However, they said that in this time we see that you as a woman are able to achieve that. So it gives us hope that maybe we are worthy as well, and one day we can. And it was just so wonderful that they were vulnerable with me, but at the same time so brave in sharing what they saw and how it made them feel. And that is, it stuck with me, and it was just such a beautiful moment.
No, I love that story, and as we kind of talked a little bit before, my experience too, going to India and just working with any culture, even when I worked at an organization that was headquartered in China, it those relationships and the fact that being approachable, being open, listening, all those different things, being empathetic, those were the things that drove the team to start to do really great things. And that I loved, because then you see these individuals coming into their own, and that to me is like the most satisfying thing. And then they come back to you later, I still have some of those relationships, and they still will ask me a question about something or ask my advice for something, which is like an honor that they would even ask me. So I think that's I really, really like that a lot. And I especially like it from the reverse, you coming home and they're so proud of you, being one of them, coming home. And then it's kind of like, Kamala Harris, to you now. So maybe that's the next place you'll go, is politics. You're like, no, definitely not. You're like, I don't know. No, I think that's great. So how, with all of that, and now, of course, I work for a company headquartered in Dublin in Ireland, and I get to work with folks all over the world from Vistatec, and that's what I really like. And now, obviously, in the COVID world that we live in, with our Zoom chats and everything else in our virtual environments, do you find that is easier, harder to kind of do these days? Or, are you seeing like things just being kind of one-dimensional, or do you feel like people are kind of punching through the screen a bit?
To be honest, in my experience, I've led distributed teams. I've grown teams from the ground up in numerous regions, and so I was very familiar with the virtual nature of the experience. I'd always make time for my team, and set time for informal conversation, which is not like we don't have a set agenda. It's about learning about the person that I work with and how I can support them in their work, in their career, in their life, because we bring our whole selves to work, right? It's not that I'm compartmentalizing and I'm leaving a certain part of me at home, and then just bring part of me to work. I bring my whole self, and so that's why I encourage my teams to be as well. The one good thing I would say, the one silver lining of this exclusive virtual experience that we're all having to lean into now is that it's leveled the playing field in a lot of ways. I, in my current role, had my team of devs and in California, and I'm here in Austin. So at times I would miss out on the water cooler chat, the stuff that they would discuss passingly, and even the inside jokes, if you would. And I felt left out. But at least now with the virtual nature of our experiences, it has leveled the playing field. We are very intentional about our time. And, if I set time on my calendar for no meetings, but at the same time also, try to be good about booking time with my teams to, play games or just collaborate, just have fun, do a virtual happy hour where we can still have the sense of normalcy as much as we can in our day to day. And so to me, to answer your question, if it has bettered, or it's for better or worse, I don't know what the future holds, to be honest, in terms of the way it's a very fluid situation we're in. However, the one good thing is that in my experience, in my opinion, that everyone has embraced it. And however, with people who have caregiving duties and who have childcare responsibilities, we need to extend that grace to each other. And we need to extend that grace to ourselves too, because our work life is 100% integrated. A lot of us have, the social interactions, in-person interactions, where we drove a lot of our personal value from. So it's all now sort of focused on our work, where we're driving our personal worth and personal value from. So I would say that, it's because of that 100% integration of all of that, we should extend each other some grace and ourselves some compassion as well, that it's okay. Like, it's okay if you feel that it's, you feel that you want to have a day off. It's okay to do that. Take some time for yourself to meditate, to write, to read, whatever that, centers you. That's really important.
Yeah, I think especially, as you said, I think just in this time, it's important to have some of that separation, because I think it does get a bit too blurred. But I really do like the part that people are more themselves. I feel like you're getting to see them more multidimensionally. So I really dig that personally. Trying kind of switching gears with our next kind of visual here, talking about India. And I've been following this a lot, over the past couple of years, as I know most are, especially with emerging markets of any sort. And India, now is the third largest economy, moved ahead of Japan recently. What do you have kind of any, I know you can't predict the future, but at the same time, I'm just curious, like your take on India, because it has 22 different dialects and languages. And so that in itself is a daunting task for anybody trying to localize for that market, but it's a huge market. And then we talked a little bit, about people saying, oh, well, they speak in business English anyway, right? How do you kind of envision that happening? Obviously, Google's been investing a lot of money into the future of India. I'd love to hear your take on that.
So I love strategizing. That's a place I thrive in. And especially when it comes to global growth and expansion and how languages impact that, how localization strategy impacts that. And I am especially encouraged by organizations today that lead their global expansion effort through an emerging economy first, instead of investing into FIGs or into the European language sets. They lead with emerging market, be it Brazil, be it somewhere in Latin America or Asia, because that's huge. It's a huge potential. I mean, in India, we're 1.3 billion and strong, and despite it's a very diverse country in terms of our culturalization within the country, in terms of the socioeconomic way that it divides us, in terms of religion, in every possible way you can think of. It's very diverse, but at the same time, we celebrate our differences. And we're very good about celebrating our uniquenesses and coexisting. And India is unique and challenging in that sense. To your point, that there are so many languages, and how do we determine what to lead, which language to go to market with? And I think that's a very interesting question, which I don't think we have yet the perfect answer to that, because there is a huge chunk of population that would speak each of those languages. However, it largely depends on your product and the segment that you are looking to target, and also the region, the sub-region that you are looking to enter into India with. If you're focusing on major cities versus, B towns, C towns, like how do you strategize that, and how are you really identifying the market segmentation to really go to market with, to have a very precise and focused strategy? But yeah, it's definitely encouraging and exciting to me when brands lead.
Do you think there's a vertical specifically that is kind of geared up and ready to take flight in India, to and where someone or big multinational organization is going to decide that they're going to definitely be investing in Hindi and others as well?
I mean, some of the companies to look up in this realm, I would say definitely Netflix and Amazon have done exceptionally well, in going to market. I remember when I was starting, or when I was in my film background, when my film role leading acquisitions and localization, my company at that time, I was a product owner for developing a VOD platform, which was very new in the sense Netflix had just gone completely streaming, and there was a lot of noise about how that'll fail and all of that. And I was developing this prototype that on the front end we would be able to replicate into different regions and these emerging markets, because there was a need for free content there. And it was essentially ad revenue versus subscription model. However, of course, with the limitation of infrastructure and just internet and data centers, et cetera, that was a challenging ask about 10 years back. But that has changed because our infrastructures in these emerging markets and economies have improved, be it Amazon trying to logistically deliver a 48-hour turnaround into an order that's placed online, in an attempt to displace the local leader Flipkart in a lot of ways, or it is Netflix, which is looking to displace the local, Indian region-specific streaming services that really didn't have the power to have that sort of collateral and diversity in the content, even because it's a complex, unique space. But regional pricing, I believe, is it's essential in your go-to-market and growth efforts to really understand the segment and how you are coming across to your user, and to really identify that persona. So regional pricing, you can't really expect a product to succeed at parity with what it's priced in the US, because of course it's just the income disparity. But so as companies leading into the emerging economies, we need to be mindful of how people are finding us. What is the existing organic adoption? What are we pricing our product as, and how are we positioning our brand, and what are the channels through which people consume their technology, and what do the customers really need?
Yeah, no, I think that you touched on a lot of different areas there. Netflix is definitely one that I think is introducing a lot of folks to, dubbing for the first time. Like even I'm talking to family members who are watching, foreign shows, and back in the day, no one would watch dubbing or listen to dubbing or subtitles. And now they're like, oh, these shows are great, and they're culturally a little bit different. And I think that also it brings an excitement to the users. So on that note, with like user experience, customer experience, which is always a hot topic, and kind of the personalization of such, heading from 2020 into 2021, which I know everybody is anxiously awaiting 21. I am curious, do you, future wise, do you think that we will, even if there is, let's say, hopefully a vaccine here soon, and the pandemic is a little bit behind us, do you see, and I know nobody has a crystal ball, but do you see that continuing? And for me personally, I'm a little jaded on that but I believe it will. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
I really do believe that there is this human spirit that is really very strong. And the one thing that as humans we have been able to endure over centuries and over time is to really flex our muscle of adaptability, and that gets us far. And I believe with this time, as we are confined into our homes and we've had some time with ourselves, that we've been able to reflect and identify what we value the most in the world, and really champion that for ourselves, be it us defining our own personal purpose and how we live and exist, or be it finding a growth opportunity, be it whatever. That adaptability and that need to grow and reflect will really take us far. And I hope that we emerge stronger and better and kinder as people through this experience.
Yeah, myself as well. So no, I appreciate this so much, Iti. It was a pleasure having you on X Cultural, powered by Vistatec today. I think that there's so much that we could have dove into a lot further, and if we had multiple hours to talk about. But no, I definitely am excited for the future. I think it's important what you said as far as finding your purpose and aligning that, and being positive and finding positive changes, within yourself, or, representative of your organization or whatever it is, to drive things forward. So I definitely love the optimism and the positivity that just resonates off of you, Iti. So thank you so much for that today. It's been just a blast talking to you throughout. So thank you. Did you have any kind of final comments on your end about anything?
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. I hope, we feel a little uplifted and charged by, after listening to this conversation, because that is something that's an energy that really drives me as well in my day. And the one, as far as organizations are concerned, the one thing that I'd say is that I love a mission-driven business, because eventually that is the core of what it's the business starts off with, is to solve a customer problem, is customer challenge, and that is a mission that drives them. However, that's how capitalism eventually works, that these companies evolve and they explode into these enormous businesses. But it is for all of us, no matter what organization or what part of this workflow that we're a part of, that we continue to tie our work into a mission, be it of the organization or of us as people, to really make this experience wonderful for all of us as humans, as leaders and executives. So thank you for having me.
No, absolutely. And just one shameless plug here. If you haven't submitted an entry to the Think Global Forum Awards or the Think Global Awards, go to www.thinkglobalforum.org/awards and submit or enter someone or nominate them. There's 14 different categories: sustainability, brand of the year, Localization Person of the Year. So please submit, it's free, and the deadline is November 30th. And also finally, happy Thanksgiving to everybody next week for those that are in the United States. Once again, Iti, thank you so much, and everybody have a wonderful day. Cheers. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, Iti.
Yeah. Yo, let's do this. Now picture homie rolling.